The screams started at midnight. Not one scream, but dozens, rising from every corner of the village like a chorus of the damned. Children bolted upright in their beds, their eyes wide with terror they couldn't explain. Mothers clutched their babies, feeling their small bodies burn with fever that had no earthly cause. And in the center of the village, where the earth had been freshly turned just 7 days before, the ground itself seemed to pulse with an angry heartbeat. This was the village of Kikuyu, nestled in the shadow of the great mountain that touched the sky. This was a place where prosperity once flowed like honey, where laughter echoed through the valleys, where children played without fear and elders smiled with contentment. But that was before. Before the girl. Before the pit. Before the community buried their own souls along with her innocent body. Let me take you back to when it all began, to the moment when heaven itself turned its face away from this cursed land. 3 moons earlier, the village had been paradise. The kind of place travelers spoke of in hushed, envious tones. The kind of place where the sweet potatoes grew so large that one could feed a family, where the millet stood tall and golden, where the livestock were fat and the children even fatter. Mount Kenya watched over them like a protective grandfather, its snow-capped peak catching the first light of dawn and the last rays of sunset. In this paradise lived a girl named Wanjiru. 14 harvests old, with eyes that sparkled like morning dew and a smile that could make even the grumpiest elder chuckle. Every morning, before the sun painted the sky, she would wake and help her mother, Nyambura, fetch water from the river. Every afternoon, she would carry food to the elderly who could no longer walk easily. Every evening, she would sing, her voice floating through the village like a blessing. That child has the soul of an angel, old Mama Wangari would say, accepting the bowl of porridge Wanjiru brought her daily. Mark my words, the ancestors smile upon her. But not everyone smiled when they looked at Wanjiru. In a hut not far from hers lived a woman named Mombai, whose face had grown bitter with the years. Mombai had a daughter too, Wanjiku, the same age as Wanjiru. But where Wanjiru glowed with kindness, Wanjiku sulked and complained. Where Wanjiru helped, Wanjiku hid. Where Wanjiru was praised, Wanjiku was scolded. And Mombai watched. And Mombai seethed. And Mombai plotted. Why does everyone love her? Mombai would hiss to herself, watching Wanjiru distribute maize to the poor. What makes her so special? My daughter is just as good, but no one sees it. No one appreciates her. The poison of envy is slow but thorough. It seeps into the bones, corrupts the heart, and eventually it finds a way to strike. The drought came suddenly, like a thief in the night. 1 week the rains fell as they always had, blessing the crops and filling the rivers. The next week, nothing. The clouds gathered, heavy and promising, but they refused to break. They hung in the sky like a taunt, like a cruel joke from the gods. Give it time, said Elder Mwangi, the oldest and wisest of the village council. The rains will come. They always do. But they didn't. Days turned into weeks. The crops began to wither. The rivers began to shrink. The livestock began to die. And the people began to panic. Wanjiru's father, Kamau, stood in his field one afternoon, staring at the shriveling maize stalks. A strong man, the proud man, reduced to helplessness by the empty sky. Beside him, his daughter placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. Father, the rains will return, Wanjiru said softly. We must have faith. Kamau looked at his daughter, his firstborn, his pride. Your mother and I have always taught you to speak truth and walk in righteousness, my child. That is all we can do. The rest is in the hands of Nai. Nai, the Creator, the one who dwelt atop the great mountain, the one who saw all and knew all. Surely Nai would not abandon them. Surely there was a reason for this suffering. The village council met under the sacred magumo tree, that ancient fig whose roots run deeper than memory. 7 elders sat in a circle, their faces grave, their voices low. We must consult the diviner, said Elder Kariuki, wiping sweat from his weathered brow. Something has angered the spirits. We must know what it is. The others murmured agreement. In times of crisis, in moments when the natural world seemed to revolt against them, they turned to Karanja, the diviner. He was a thin man with sharp features and sharper eyes, who claimed to see beyond the veil that separated the living from the dead, the physical from the spiritual. That same evening, Mumbai made a journey. She waited until darkness fell, until the cooking fires burned low and most of the village slept. Then she slipped from her hut and made her way to the diviner's dwelling on the edge of the settlement. Karanja was expecting her. He always knew when someone would come. Or at least, that's what he told them. I need your help, Mumbai said, her voice tight with desperation and something darker. Everyone needs my help these days, Karanja replied, not looking up from the bones he was arranging on the ground. The drought has made me a very busy man. I can pay you 3 goats. The best in my herd. Now Karanja looked up, interest flickering in his eyes. 3 goats was a fortune in these lean times. What exactly are you asking for? Mumbai leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper. When the elders come to you, when they ask you to divine the cause of this drought, I want you to name Wanjiru, daughter of Komau, as the source. Karanja's eyes widened. You want me to accuse an innocent girl of bringing this curse? Is she innocent? Mumbai hissed. How do you know? Maybe she is the cause. Maybe her false piety hides something dark. And if she isn't, well, someone must pay the price to bring back the rains. Why should it be my daughter? Why should it be my family? Let it be theirs. Karanja was silent for a long moment. His conscience, buried though it was beneath years of deception and trickery, made one last feeble protest. Then he thought of the goats. He thought of how hungry he had been. He thought of his own survival. 4 goats, he said. 3. 4, or find another diviner. Mumbai's jaw clenched. Done. The next morning, the entire village gathered. Every man, woman, and child stood in the great clearing, fear etched into their faces. The sun beat down mercilessly from a cloudless sky. In the center of the crowd, Karanja prepared his ritual, laying out bones, sacred stones, and herbs that smoked and hissed when he threw them on the fire. Wanjiru stood with her parents, confused by the tension in the air. Her mother held her hand tightly, too tightly, as if sensing something terrible approaching. Karanja began to chant, his body swaying, his eyes rolling back in his head. The crowd watched in silence, barely breathing. Then, suddenly, he stiffened. His arm shot out, pointing randomly into the crowd, and his voice rose to a shriek. The spirits speak. They show me the one who has brought this curse upon us. A girl, young and false, who wears the face of piety but harbors darkness in her heart. She has offended the ancestors. She has brought the wrath of Nai upon us all. The crowd erupted in frightened whispers. Who? Who is it? Karanja's arm swung slowly across the gathering, milking the moment for all its drama. Then it stopped, his bony finger pointing directly at one person. Wanjiru. Daughter of Komau. She is the witch who has cursed us. The world stopped. Complete, utter silence fell over the clearing, so profound that the crackling of Karanja's fire sounded like thunder. Then Nyambura screamed. No. No, that's not possible. Not my daughter. Kamau stepped forward, his powerful frame shaking with rage. You lie, diviner. My daughter is innocent. She is the kindest soul in this village. But the crowd was already turning, fear transforming into anger, desperation seeking an outlet. Voices rose from every direction. The diviner has spoken. We must trust his vision. We should have known. She was too good to be true. My child is sick because of her. Wanjiru stood frozen, her young mind unable to comprehend what was happening. Ha! They thought she had cursed the village. But she had done nothing. She had only tried to help, to be kind, to honor her parents and the gods. Please, she said, her voice small and trembling. Please, I have done nothing wrong. I would never hurt anyone. I love this village. I love all of you. But fear has no ears for reason. Elder Mwangi raised his hand for silence. The crowd quieted, though the murmuring continued like the rumble of distant thunder. The old man's face was troubled, deeply troubled. He had known Wanjiru since her birth. He had watched her grow into a girl of remarkable character. Could she truly be the cause? Karanja, he said slowly, are you certain of this? The diviner's word is sacred, but so is the life of a child. Are you absolutely certain? Karanja's eyes flickered for just a moment. Just one moment where doubt, where guilt, where the terrible knowledge of what he was doing threatened to break through. But he thought of the goats. He thought of Mumbai's payment. And he hardened his heart. I am certain, Elder. The spirits have shown me. If we do not act, the drought will destroy us all. The council convened immediately, right there in the clearing. They could not wait, not with the entire village watching, not with panic in the air like smoke. 7 elders sat in judgment while Wanjiru stood before them, her parents on either side, and the whole community bearing witness. Speak, child, Elder Mwangi said, though his voice cracked with emotion. Defend yourself. Have you practiced witchcraft? Have you called upon dark spirits? Have you sought to harm this village? Wanjiru's tears finally came, streaming down her young face. No, grandfather, I swear by Nai, by the mountain, by the graves of my ancestors, I have done nothing. I do not even know how to practice such things. I only know how to love, how to serve, how to honor my family and my community. Kamau stepped forward, his voice booming across the clearing. My daughter speaks the truth. I have raised her in the ways of our people, in respect and righteousness. She rises before dawn to help her mother. She feeds the elderly. She tends to children. Ask anyone who truly knows her. Several voices called out in agreement. Old Mama Wangari hobbled forward as fast as her ancient legs could carry her. This is madness, she shouted. Wanjiru is innocent. I would stake my life on it. But other voices rose too, voices of those whose children were sick, whose crops were dying, whose livestock were perishing. The diviner has never been wrong. We cannot risk our entire village for one girl. Better one should die than all should perish. Mumbai stood in the crowd, silent, watching. Her face showed the appropriate concern, the appropriate shock. No one could read the dark satisfaction in her heart. No one except her daughter, Wanjiku, who stood beside her, staring at her mother with growing horror, beginning to understand what had been done. The elders deliberated for hours while the sun climbed higher and the heat grew oppressive. They knew Wanjiru. They knew her character. But they also knew the drought. They knew the fear. They knew that desperate people need desperate solutions. Finally, as the sun began its descent, Elder Mwangi stood. His face had aged 10 years in those few hours. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper, but in the silence, everyone heard. The council has reached a decision. Given the diviner's testimony and the severity of our situation, given that the welfare of the entire village hangs in the balance, we have decided that Wanjiru must be sacrificed to appease the spirits and bring back the rains. Nyambura collapsed. Kamau caught her, his own knees buckling. Around them, some people wept. Others nodded grimly. Most simply looked away, unable to meet the eyes of the condemned girl. No. Wanjiru cried. Please, no. I am innocent. Mother. Father. But the warriors were already moving forward, strong men who had played with Wanjiru when she was a child, who had received kindness from her hands. Now they bound those hands with rough rope. The sentence will be carried out at dawn tomorrow, Elder Mwangi continued, and now tears ran freely down his weathered cheeks. She will be buried alive, as is the custom for those who have cursed the land. May Nai have mercy on us all. That night, locked in a small hut on the edge of the village, Wanjiru sat in darkness. Her parents had been allowed to visit her one last time. Her mother held her, rocking back and forth, keening with grief so profound it seemed to tear the very fabric of the night. My baby, my precious baby, forgive us, Nyambura sobbed. Forgive us for being too weak to protect you. Hush, mother, Wanjiru said, and somehow, impossibly, there was peace in her young voice. You taught me to always speak truth and walk in righteousness. I have done that. If I must die for doing right, then that is the path I must walk. But know this, both of you, I forgive this village. I forgive the elders. I forgive even those who falsely accused me. Kamau, the strong warrior, the proud father, wept like a child. You should not have to forgive them. You should not have to die. This is wrong, O Wanjiru, wrong in the eyes of Nai and every ancestor who watches over us. Perhaps, Wanjiru said softly. But if I am to meet the ancestors tomorrow, I will meet them with a clean heart. Promise me, Father, promise me you will not seek revenge. Promise me you will not let bitterness consume you. How can I promise such a thing? Kamau choked out. How can I not rage against this injustice? Because rage will only create more death, more pain. Someone must break the cycle. Let it be me. Outside the hut, a small figure listened to these words. Wanjiku, Mumbai's daughter, had crept to the prison hut, driven by guilt and horror. She had Wanjiru's forgiveness, had her grace, when something broke inside her. She ran through the night to her mother's hut. Mother. Mother, we must tell them the truth. We must confess what you did. Mumbai grabbed her daughter, clamping a hand over her mouth. Be silent, you foolish girl. Do you want to destroy our family? What's done is done. Wanjiru will die, and we will live. That is the way of the world. The way of the world. Wanjiku tore free from her mother's grasp. This is murder. This is evil. How can you sleep? How can you live with yourself? I do what I must to protect my family. You will understand when you are older. I will never understand this. Never. Wanjiku ran from the hut, but where could she go? Who would believe the daughter against the diviner? Who would listen to her when the entire village had already made their decision? She sat outside in the darkness, weeping, alone. Dawn came too quickly. It always does when you dread its arrival. The sky lightened from black to grey to a sickly yellow, the sun rising over a village that had lost its soul. The warriors came for Wanjiru. They had dug the pit the night before, deep and wide, on a hill outside the village. As they led her from the hut, the entire community formed a procession. It was required. Everyone must witness. Everyone must participate, even if only by being present. That way, the guilt would be shared, the blood on everyone's hands, not just a few. Wanjiru walked with her head high. Her parents walked beside her, holding her hands, 3 people making the long journey to death. Behind them, the villagers followed in silence. Even the children had stopped crying, sensing the terrible finality of the moment. They reached the hill as the sun climbed higher. The pit gaped like a hungry mouth in the red earth. Beside it stood piles of dirt, waiting to be shoveled back in. Waiting to bury a living girl. If you're watching this for the first time, hit that subscribe button right now. Because what happens next will shake you to your core, and you're going to want to see how this story ends. Trust me on this. Elder Mwangi stood at the edge of the pit, his face grey as ash. Does the accused have any final words? Wanjiru stepped forward. She looked out over the crowd, at the faces she had known all her life. Faces of people she had served, had loved, had laughed with. Faces that now would not meet her eyes. And she began to sing. Her voice rose clear and strong, a melody that seemed to come from somewhere beyond herself. It was beautiful and terrible at once, haunting in a way that would echo through the years to come. I am innocent, the earth knows my truth. Nay, the Creator sees all that you do. When you cover me with soil and stone, when you pile the earth upon my bones. Remember these words, remember and know, you will reap every seed that you sow. I forgive you, but the land will not forget. Every child who grows sick, every crop that will not grow. Every dream that becomes a nightmare, every peace that turns to woe. Know that justice has a memory, know that innocence cries out. The blood of the righteous speaks louder than your doubt. The song went on, verse after verse, and as she sang, something changed in the atmosphere. The air grew heavy. The sun seemed to dim. Several people in the crowd swayed on their feet, suddenly dizzy. Karanja, standing near the front, felt his stomach turn. For a moment, just a moment, he wanted to scream the truth, to confess, to stop this madness. But fear of exposure, fear of the mob's rage turning on him, kept his mouth shut. Mumbai's face had gone white. This was not how it was supposed to be. The girl was supposed to die quietly, to fade away. Not this. Not this song that seemed to brand itself into everyone's minds, that made the very air vibrate with accusation. Wanjiru finished her song and looked directly at Elder Mwangi. I am ready, grandfather. I will walk down on my own. I will not make the warriors force me. Child, the old man's voice broke completely, if there is any way, any other way. There is not. The decision is made. The village has spoken. Let us finish this. She descended into the pit. The walls rose around her, red earth that would become her coffin. She stood at the bottom, looking up at the circle of sky above, at the faces peering down at her. I love you, mother, she called up. I love you, father. Remember me with joy, not sorrow. Nyambura screamed, a sound that would haunt that village for generations. Kamau had to be held back by 5 warriors to keep him from diving into the pit himself. Elder Mwangi picked up the first handful of dirt. His hands shook so badly he nearly dropped it. He looked down at Wanjiru one last time. May Nai forgive us, he whispered, and dropped the dirt. It fell onto Wanjiru's head, into her hair. She did not flinch. One by one, others came forward. Some threw large shovelfuls, wanting to get it over with quickly. Others threw small amounts, unable to do more. Some refused entirely and walked away, choosing exile over participation. The dirt piled up. First to her ankles. Then her knees. Then her waist. Wanjiru continued to sing, her voice growing quieter as the earth rose around her. To her chest. To her shoulders. To her neck. I am innocent, her voice came, muffled now, barely audible. The earth knows my truth. To her chin. To her mouth. Her eyes remained open, looking up at the sky, at the mountain, at Nai's dwelling place, until the very last moment. Then her face disappeared beneath the red earth. A few more shovelfuls, and the pit was full. They stamped the dirt down, packed it tight. Where Wanjiru had stood, now there was only earth. And the sky remained cloudless. The village returned home in silence. No one spoke. No one could bear to look at one another. Parents clutched their children. Husbands held their wives. Everyone felt the weight of what they had done, pressing down on them like the earth had pressed down on Wanjiru. That night, in her hut, Nyambura lay unmoving, staring at nothing. Kamau sat outside, his back against the wall, his face in his hands. Neither of them would ever truly smile again. In her own hut, Mombai tried to eat dinner but couldn't swallow. Wanjiru refused to even look at her mother. The silence between them was a living thing, dark and accusatory. And Karanja, the diviner, sat alone in his dwelling, staring at the 4 goats Mombai had delivered. They seemed to stare back at him, their eyes knowing, accusing. He had thought he would feel relief once it was done. Instead, he felt something cold and heavy settling into his bones. The first scream came at midnight. A child, one of Elder Kariuki's grandchildren, bolted upright in bed, shrieking in terror. His mother rushed to him, found him burning with fever, his eyes rolled back in his head. Before dawn, 5 more children had fallen ill with the same mysterious sickness. By the end of the week, it was 20 children. And the rain still did not come. In fact, the drought worsened. The few remaining water sources dried up overnight. Crops that had been merely wilting now turned black and died. Livestock began dropping dead in the fields for no apparent reason. But worse than any of that were the dreams. Every single person in the village, from the oldest elder to the youngest child, had the same dream every night. They saw Wanjiru beneath the earth, her eyes open, staring up at them. And they heard her song, over and over, branding itself into their minds. I am innocent, the earth knows my truth. People began to crack under the strain. A warrior who had thrown dirt into the pit cut off his own hand, screaming that he could still feel the earth on his palm, could still feel Wanjiru's hair beneath the soil. He bled out before anyone could stop him. A woman who had called for Wanjiru's death went mad, running through the village at night, shrieking, "She's following me. She's right behind me. I can hear her singing." They found her the next morning at the bottom of a ravine. 2 weeks after the burial, Karanja fell ill. Not with the children's fever, but with something else, something that made his skin break out in oozing sores that would not heal. He tried every remedy he knew, every herb, every ritual. Nothing worked. The sores spread, and the pain was excruciating. Delirious with fever and agony, he called for the elders. They came reluctantly, afraid of contagion, afraid of what they might hear. I must tell you, Karanja gasped out, his body convulsing. I must confess, before I die, before she comes for me. Who? Elder Mwangi asked. Who comes for you? Wanjiru. I see her every night. Standing at the foot of my bed. Staring at me. She knows. She knows what I did. What you did. What are you saying, diviner? And then it came pouring out, the truth in all its ugliness. The bribe from Mumbai. The false accusation. The lie that had condemned an innocent girl to a horrific death. The elders stood in stunned silence, the full weight of their crime settling on them like a mountain. She was innocent, Elder Mwangi whispered. Nai, help us, she was innocent. Find Mumbai, Elder Kariuki said, his voice shaking with rage. Find her now. But Mumbai was gone. She had fled in the night, taking only what she could carry, leaving behind her daughter, her home, everything. Some say she ran into the wilderness and was never seen again. Others say she was found weeks later, her body torn apart by wild animals. Still others swear she still wanders the forests, unable to die, unable to find peace, cursed to roam forever. Wanjiru, abandoned by her mother, told the elders everything she knew. Her testimony confirmed Karanja's confession. The village had killed an innocent girl. They had buried alive a child whose only crime was being kind. The sickness spread. Half the village's children were now afflicted, and some had started dying. The wells were completely dry. The crops were dead. Animals would not enter the village lands. Even birds refused to fly over the cursed ground. Elder Mwangi called another council meeting, but this time, it was different. This time, there was no false diviner to consult, no easy scapegoat to blame. This time, they had to face the truth of what they had done. "We must seek help," he said. "We must find someone who can tell us how to make this right, if it even can be made right." They sent a delegation to the distant mountains, where it was said a wise woman named Wanjiru lived. The journey took 5 days through drought-stricken lands. The 3 men who made the trip saw the curse's reach extended far beyond their village. Everywhere Wanjiru's story had spread, the land itself seemed to recoil. They found Wanjiru in a cave carved into the mountainside. She was ancient beyond measure, her hair white as snow, her eyes still sharp and knowing. She listened to their story without interruption, her face growing graver with each word. When they finished, she sat in silence for a long time. So long that the men wondered if she had fallen asleep. Then she spoke. "You did not just bury a girl. You buried justice itself. You buried truth. You buried innocence. And when you bury these things, the earth itself rejects you." "How do we fix it?" one of the men pleaded. "How do we end this curse?" "You cannot end it. You can only transform it. The curse will remain until justice is restored, until the innocent girl is honored, until the community acknowledges its sin not just with words but with actions." "What actions?" "We will do anything." Wanjiru's eyes fixed on him with an intensity that made him shrink back. "Will you? Will you truly do anything? Even if it costs you everything you have? Even if it means changing who you are as a people?" "Yes. Anything." "Then listen carefully. You must dig up the girl's body and give her a burial befitting a hero, not a criminal. You must confess your crime to every neighboring village, holding nothing back. You must erect a stone in the center of your village with her full story carved upon it, so that every generation will know what you did. You must create new laws that protect the innocent and ensure that never again can someone be condemned without absolute proof. And finally, the girl's parents must forgive the village, or the curse will never lift." The men looked at each other in despair. "Wanjiru's parents will never forgive us." "How can they? We murdered their daughter." "That is not for me to decide," Wanjiru said. "You must ask them. You must kneel before them and beg for what you do not deserve. Perhaps they will grant it. Perhaps they will not. But you must try, or your village will die, every man, woman, and child, until nothing remains but bones and dust and the memory of injustice." The delegation returned with Wanjiru's instructions. The village gathered once more, this time in true repentance. Elder Mwangi announced what must be done, and to their credit, no one protested. They knew they deserved far worse. The next day, at dawn, the entire village went to the hill where Wanjiru had been buried. The warriors began to dig. They dug slowly, carefully, reverently. Everyone wanted to be present, to bear witness, to participate in this act of atonement. The soil was hard, packed down by feet and time and malice. As they dug deeper, people began to hear something. A sound like singing, very faint, coming from beneath the earth. "Do you hear that?" a woman whispered. "Do you hear her?" They all heard it. Wanjiru's song, rising from the ground itself, growing louder as they dug deeper. Some people fell to their knees, weeping. Others stood transfixed, horror and grief washing over them in waves. Finally, the shovels struck something. The warriors stopped and looked at Elder Mwangi. He nodded. They cleared away the last of the dirt with their hands. Wanjiru lay there, her body miraculously preserved, as if she had died only yesterday. Her eyes were closed now, her face peaceful. Her hands were folded across her chest. She looked like she was sleeping. But the most remarkable thing, the thing that made everyone gasp, was this: clutched in her hands was a small flower. A flower that should not exist, could not exist, that grew nowhere in this drought-stricken land. A flower that glowed with a faint, otherworldly light. Nai has marked her, Wangari said. She had come with the delegation, had insisted on being present for this moment. He has shown you that she was his beloved, and you destroyed her. Now you must make it right. They lifted Wanjiru's body with infinite care, wrapped her in the finest cloth the village possessed, covered her with flowers gathered from distant lands. They carried her back to the village in a procession, but this time it was not a march to execution. It was a funeral for a hero, for a martyr, for a saint. They buried her in the center of the village, in a spot of honor where everyone would pass by daily. They erected a beautiful marker, carved by the village's finest craftsman, depicting Wanjiru with her hands outstretched in blessing, despite everything, still blessing the people who had killed her. Then came the hardest part. Elder Mwangi and the other elders went to the hut of Nyambura and Kamau. The couple had barely left their home since Wanjiru's death. They had become ghosts, moving through life without truly living. The elders knelt in the dust outside the hut. Nyambura, Kamau, we come to beg your forgiveness. We know we have no right to ask. We know what we did is unforgivable. But the wise woman says that without your forgiveness, the curse will never lift, and the entire village will perish. We do not ask for our own sakes, but for the sake of the children who had no part in this, who do not deserve to suffer for our sins. For a long moment, there was no response. Then Nyambura emerged from the hut. She had aged decades in weeks. Her face was gaunt, her eyes hollow. But when she spoke, her voice was steady. My daughter's last words to us were to not seek revenge, to not let bitterness consume us. She asked us to break the cycle of pain. How can I honor her memory if I cannot honor her final wish? She looked at each elder in turn, and they squirmed under her gaze like children caught in wrongdoing. I do not forgive you because you deserve it. I do not forgive you because you have earned it. I forgive you because my daughter asked me to. I forgive you because holding on to this hatred will only poison what remains of my life. But know this, hear this clearly, I forgive the community. I forgive those who participated out of fear and ignorance. But those who lied, who manipulated, who knowingly sent an innocent girl to her death. For them, I have no forgiveness. Let Nai and the ancestors judge them. Let the earth itself judge them. My forgiveness does not extend that far. Kamau stood beside his wife, his hand on her shoulder. What she said. We will try to forgive, for Wanjiru's sake. But we will never forget. No one should forget. That is why the stone must be erected. That is why the laws must be changed. That is why this story must be told, over and over, to every generation, forever. The elders bowed their heads, accepting these terms. It was more than they deserved. That night, as the village slept, the rains finally came. Not a gentle sprinkle, but a deluge, a torrent, as if the sky itself was weeping. The rain fell for 3 days and 3 nights, soaking into the parched earth, filling the wells, bringing life back to the land. The children's fevers broke. The sickness lifted. Animals began to return to the village lands. Birds sang again. Slowly, painfully, life returned. But the village was changed forever. The stone stood in the center of the settlement, and every child was brought to it as soon as they were old enough to understand. They learned Wanjiru's story. They learned the price of injustice. They learned that fear is a poor counselor, that mob mentality leads to horror, that the innocent must be protected above all else. New laws were written, carved into wood and stone so they could never be forgotten. No one could be condemned without multiple witnesses. No accusation could stand on the word of a single diviner. The accused must be allowed to defend themselves fully. Children were especially protected, their innocence sacred, their lives valued above convenience or fear. Years passed. A generation grew up knowing Wanjiru's name, honoring her memory. The village prospered again, but it was a different prosperity, one built on a foundation of justice and truth rather than convenience and comfort. Elder Mwangi lived 10 more years after that terrible day. On his deathbed, surrounded by his family, his last words were, "I see her. Wanjiru stands at the foot of my bed. She is smiling. She forgives me. Oh, thank Nai, she forgives me." And he died with tears of relief on his weathered cheeks. Nyambura and Kamau lived out their days in quiet grief. They never had another child. They could not bear to. Every day, Nyambura would visit Wanjiru's grave, bringing fresh flowers, singing the old songs. People would see her there, an old woman talking to the stone as if her daughter could hear. And perhaps she could. Because strange things happened around that grave. Flowers bloomed there even in the dry season. The grass grew greener, more lush. People swore they sometimes heard singing, soft and sweet, coming from nowhere and everywhere at once. And anyone who came to the grave with a troubled heart, seeking guidance, would leave feeling somehow lighter, somehow heard, somehow blessed. 20 years after Wanjiru's death, Wanjiku, Mombai's daughter, came to the grave. She was a woman now, married with children of her own. She had carried the guilt of her mother's actions for 2 decades, wondering if she should have done more, said more, fought harder to stop what happened. She knelt at the grave and wept. "I am sorry. I am so sorry. I was just a girl. I did not know how to stop it. But I should have tried harder. I should have screamed the truth from the rooftops. Your blood is on my hands too, Wanjiru. On all our hands." As she wept, she felt something, a presence, warm and forgiving. And she heard, clear as if someone stood beside her, a voice saying, "You were a child too. You were afraid too. I forgive you. Now forgive yourself." Wanjiku looked up, tears streaming down her face, but she was alone. Yet she knew, with absolute certainty, that she had been heard, that she had been forgiven, that she could finally begin to heal. The story of Wanjiru spread far beyond the village of Kikuyu. It became a legend told throughout the lands of the Kikuyu people, then throughout Kenya, then throughout Africa. Parents told it to children as a warning. Teachers told it as a lesson. Elders told it as history. And the message was always the same: justice must be based on truth, not fear. The innocent must be protected, even when it is inconvenient, even when it is costly. A community that will sacrifice the innocent to save itself has already lost its soul. And the blood of the righteous cries out from the ground, demanding accountability. Generations passed. The original village changed, grew, modernized. But the stone remained, protected, honored. It became a site of pilgrimage. People would come from distant lands to see it, to pay their respects, to learn the lesson. And still, the flowers bloomed around Wanjiru's grave, even in drought, even in the harshest conditions. Still, people heard the singing. Still, the story lived. Because some stories are more than just stories. Some stories are warnings. Some stories are prophecies. Some stories are truths carved so deep into the world that they can never be erased. Now, if you've made it this far into this story, I need you to do something for me. Hit that like button, drop a comment telling me what you think about Wanjiru's story, and subscribe to this channel because we bring you the most powerful African folktales that will make you think, make you feel, and change how you see the world. But we are not done yet. Because this story has one more twist, one final revelation that will leave you questioning everything. You see, the curse never fully lifted. Oh, the rains came back. The children recovered. The land healed. But something remained, something the wise woman Wangari had warned about but that the village had not fully understood. A curse, once awakened, does not simply disappear. It transforms. It adapts. It waits. 50 years after Wanjiru's death, a new generation had taken over the village. Most of them had not been alive when the terrible events occurred. They knew the story, yes, but it was just a story to them, a tale from the past, a lesson learned by their grandparents. They began to grow complacent. The laws were still on the books, but they were not always followed as strictly. The stone was still there, but people stopped visiting it as often. The story was still told, but with less urgency, less weight. That was then, the young people said. We would never do such a thing now. We are more enlightened, more educated, more civilized. Pride is a dangerous thing. It makes us forget that we are all capable of evil, given the right circumstances, the right pressures, the right fears. Then came another drought. Not as severe as the first, but bad enough. Crops failed. Water grew scarce. And the people began to panic. They did not consult a diviner this time. They were too modern for that. Instead, they held meetings, formed committees, looked for scientific solutions. But when the drought persisted, when rational solutions failed, the old fears crept back in. Someone must be to blame. Someone must pay the price. This time, the accused was not a girl but a young man, an outsider who had married into the community. He was different, quiet, kept to himself. When tools went missing, when a child fell into a well, when a house caught fire, people began to whisper. It is him. It must be him. Ever since he came, nothing has gone right. The accusations built slowly, subtly. No dramatic divination this time, just quiet murmurs that grew louder, more insistent. The young man protested his innocence, but fewer and fewer people listened. And then one night, an old woman visited Wanjiru's grave. She was one of the last survivors from the original tragedy, one of the few who remembered. She knelt at the stone, her ancient bones creaking. Wanjiru, she whispered, they are forgetting. The new generation is forgetting your lesson. They think they are different, better, but they are making the same mistakes. Please, if you can hear me, if your spirit still guards this place, help them remember before it is too late. That night, every person in the village had the same dream. They saw Wanjiru, standing in the center of the village, pointing at the stone that bore her story. And they heard her voice, sad but firm, have you learned nothing? Must the same lesson be taught again? Must more innocent blood soak into this ground before you understand? They woke in terror, every single one of them, at the exact same moment. And they understood. They were about to repeat history. They were about to condemn an innocent man. The next morning, the entire village gathered at Wanjiru's grave. The young man was there too, confused, frightened, still not understanding how close he had come to death. The village elder, the great-grandson of Elder Mwangi, stood before the stone and read Wanjiru's story aloud, as it had been written so many years ago. He read every word, letting the weight of it settle on the crowd. When he finished, he turned to the young man. We ask your forgiveness for our suspicions, for our whispers, for our willingness to blame you without proof. We nearly repeated the greatest sin of our ancestors. We nearly forgot the lesson that was bought with innocent blood. The young man, overwhelmed, simply nodded. He understood now what had almost happened to him, understood the terrible history of this place, understood how close he had come to being the second Wanjiru. The drought ended 3 days later. Whether it was coincidence or divine intervention, no one could say. But the village had been given a second chance, a reprieve, a reminder. And this time, they truly learned. They established annual commemorations of Wanjiru's sacrifice. They made her story part of every child's education, not just a tale told once but a constant, living reminder. They created systems to check their own worst impulses, to question their own certainties, to protect those who were different or vulnerable. Because Wanjiru's curse was not really a curse at all. It was a mirror reflecting back the community's own capacity for evil. And as long as they looked into that mirror honestly, as long as they remembered what they were capable of, as long as they honored the innocent girl who paid the ultimate price for their fear, the curse would remain dormant. But it never disappeared. It never could. Because the potential for such evil lives in every community, in every generation, in every human heart. The curse is the reminder that we must always be vigilant, always be questioning, always be willing to stand up for the innocent even when it is difficult, even when it is costly, even when we are afraid. The wise woman Wanjiru had been right. The curse could not be ended. It could only be transformed. Transformed from a weapon of destruction into a guardian of justice, from a source of death into a teacher of life. And so the story of Wanjiru continues, passed down through generations, echoing through time. In every village that hears it, in every community that learns it, in every heart that truly understands it, Wanjiru's voice still sings. I am innocent, the earth knows my truth. Remember my words, remember and know, you will reap every seed that you sow. To this day, travelers who pass through that region speak of a village with a beautiful stone monument at its center. They speak of flowers that bloom year-round, of singing heard on the wind, of a presence that watches over the innocent and vulnerable. They speak of a place where justice is held sacred, where the lessons of the past are never forgotten, where the memory of one innocent girl guards an entire community from repeating the sins of their ancestors. But they also whisper of darker things. Of how, whenever injustice threatens to take root, whenever fear begins to override reason, whenever a community begins to forget the price of prejudice, strange things begin to happen. Children have nightmares. Flowers wilt at Wanjiru's grave. The singing stops. The air grows heavy with warning. Because Wanjiru still watches. Still waits. Still stands as both guardian and judge, blessing and curse, reminder and warning. Her story is not just history. It is prophecy. Not of what was, but of what could be again, what might be again, what will be again, if we forget. And that is the true power of her curse, the real nature of her blessing. She makes it impossible to forget. She forces each generation to confront the question, what would you have done? Would you have stood up for the innocent? Would you have spoken truth when others demanded lies? Would you have chosen justice over safety? The answer to that question determines whether you are blessed or cursed. Whether you are part of the solution or part of the problem. Whether you honor Wanjiru's memory or repeat her tragedy. So now I ask you, wherever you are watching this, whatever village or city or country you call home, what would you do? When fear grips your community, when people demand a scapegoat, when the innocent stand accused and the crowd howls for blood, what will you choose? Will you throw the dirt? Will you stand silent? Or will you have the courage to say no, to speak truth, to protect those who cannot protect themselves? Because here is the final, terrible truth of Wanjiru's story, it is not finished. It will never be finished. Because as long as humans gather in communities, as long as fear exists, as long as people seek easy answers to hard problems, Wanjiru's story will repeat. The only question is, which side will you be on? And one more thing before we end. Remember that young man, the outsider who was nearly condemned. Remember how the village was saved by Wanjiru's intervention, how they stopped themselves just in time. That was 10 years ago. Last month, another drought began. Worse than the others. Crops failing. Wells drying. Desperation mounting. And this week, a stranger arrived in the village. A woman, traveling alone, seeking refuge. She is different. Foreign. Keeps to herself. Speaks little. And already, the whispers have started. The flowers at Wanjiru's grave have begun to wilt. The singing has stopped. And in the dreams of the villagers, they see a girl buried alive, her eyes open, staring up at them from beneath the earth. She is watching. She is waiting. She is asking them once again, have you learned? Or must the lesson be taught in blood once more? What happens next? Will history repeat itself a third time? Or will the village finally, truly break the cycle? That story has not yet been written. It is being written now, in real time, as the stranger walks through the village and the drought worsens and the fears grow louder. And perhaps, in some way, it is being written in your community too. In your country. In your world. Because Wanjiru's curse is not confined to one village in Kenya. It is universal. It is eternal. It is the curse of human nature itself, the tendency to fear what is different, to blame the vulnerable, to sacrifice the innocent in the name of the greater good. The question is not whether the curse will strike again. The question is whether we will recognize it before it is too late. Whether we will hear Wanjiru's song before the dirt begins to fall. Whether we will choose differently than those who came before us. So subscribe to this channel if you want to know what happens next in that village. Drop a comment with your thoughts about this story, about justice, about how we protect the innocent in our own communities. And share this video, because Wanjiru's story needs to be told, over and over, to every generation, until we finally learn. The earth knows the truth. The question is, do we? And as the stranger in the village walks past Wanjiru's memorial tonight, heading to her temporary shelter on the edge of the settlement, she does not see the shadows gathering behind her. She does not hear the whispered conversations, the accusations building, the fear mounting. But Wanjiru sees. Wanjiru hears. And beneath the stone that bears her name, beneath the earth that once held her living body, something stirs. Something ancient and powerful and tired of being ignored. The curse is awakening once more. And this time, it may not be so easily appeased.